thanks for joining me. I want to show you some more really great things about the Dream fondant. It's a fondant line that I've recently fallen in love with, and it's a hybrid fondant. It's not a modeling chocolate. It's not just a fondant. It's a really great hybrid between the two. And when I say hybrid, I don't want you to think it's just like part one and part two mixed together. There's really great ingredients in there. The gums work just right so that it's really susceptible, not susceptible to heat and humidity, like a modeling chocolate might be. You might be used to some other white chocolate fondants that get terribly soft in the heat, and this really doesn't do that. So just to prove that example, I wanted to show a rose made just with Dream fondant. There's nothing added to it, no Tylose powder, no CMC, nothing else except the Dream fondant right out of the pail. Now when you take it out of the pail, I'm using the Sun-Kissed Yellow today, it is firm, so don't let that throw you off. If you open up a pail and you're like, wow, this is really hard. All you want to do is just take the twist tie off the package, off the bag, and pop the 2-pound unit in the microwave for about 15 seconds or so. And it's not going to make it mushy at all. It's going to make it really just a lot easier to knead. Now I'm working with just a small amount today, and even with this, I don't even worry so much about wrapping it up. It doesn't dry out because it's got that white chocolate in there, and it's, again, just the gums work so well together that it really doesn't dry out. So another great thing about this is that I don't even need to put powdered sugar or cornstarch on my board. You can put it right on a stainless steel table or whatever work surface, glass even, and it's just not going to stick. So I'm just going to start rolling this really, really thin. And the great thing about the fondant as well is that you can roll it super, super thin, almost ridiculously thin, so that you can get those realistic rose petals, not have those fat, chunky petals. And it's still not going to stick. So you can just keep rolling it thin. I don't know if you can see on the camera, but you can almost see the striations of the marble through the Dream fondant. You can see how thin it's getting. There's a phrase people like to use that you can roll it so thin that you can read through it. So really that's how thin you can roll it. Okay, so as I mentioned before, I left this bag open to kind of demonstrate a point. I've left this out actually for hours before, and it doesn't get that dry, cracked, elephant type skin. And if you'll notice, I've actually made some rose petals ahead of time, and I would encourage you to do that. So these have actually been sitting out about an hour, and you can see that they're still somewhat pliable, but they also are holding their shape pretty nicely. So what this does is, if you'll notice when you first cut out a circle, it's almost a little bit too pliable to work with. It's so soft that you really can't get it to hold its shape very well. But as soon as I cut it, I want to go ahead and take my ball tool and my foam and just running it along the edge, and it's going to just frill the edge and really thin it out even more than how thin I rolled it. So what I'm going to do, once I have this nice and frilled, then I set it out to kind of firm up like this. Now what that does for me is a couple of things. I can hurry and cut out so many of these. It really makes making the rose go a lot faster. And then when I'm ready to assemble, it's just a matter of taking the water brush. I just dip a little bit, put a little bit on the rose, and then this petal that's kind of already taking its shape, it tends to grab less and it frills out a little bit more. Some of these petals that I started with, you can tell that they're so tight and close together, they don't have a lot of space between, which is good for the middle because a rose is a lot tighter in the center naturally, and as it expands, there's a lot more space between each petal. So having that rose petal dried a little bit and a little bit more shape helps you to put it on the rose without it grabbing so much. It just gives it a little bit more natural look. A little bit more water, and it just naturally can fall away from the rose a little bit more, and then you can just keep adding petals as you go. So I'm just going to keep doing this until it gets... So I've just been continuing to add petals. I'm just going to add one more here. But again, because this is a hybrid, it has some white chocolate in there. Even though I've let it firm up a little bit, I am still able to use the heat of my hand a little bit to kind of warm it up if I want to change the position of the petals. Give it a little bit more natural wave, that sort of thing. So again, this does not have any Tylose powder or CMC in it. It's just the Dream fondant. It's a great hybrid. It's got enough chocolate in it that it's moldable when you're using the heat of your hand, but it's also not susceptible really to the outdoor heat, in that you can put those flowers on the cake once they've dried and they're going to really hold their stability. They're not just going to melt all over the cake. That being said, it's also edible. Even though gum paste is technically edible, as long as it doesn't have wires in it, it's something that dries so firm, it's not usually something that people enjoy eating. It's kind of like almost the texture of like an old stick of gum. It's just dry like that and kind of cracks in your mouth. This is a little bit more palatable because it's got that white chocolate in that, and the warmth of your mouth, the heat of your hand, if you hold it long enough, it softens up again. So it is something that's completely edible. So try the Dream Fondant for your uses that you would normally use gum paste for. If it's cutouts, if it's shoes, things like that. A lot of times what I'll do with shoes is just pop them in the refrigerator to have that chocolate firm up and hold its shape. And then I pull it out of the refrigerator and it really keeps its shape nicely while it finishes drying. So that's a little bit of a head start for you if you want to try that as well. But try the gum paste roses out of fondant, not out of gum paste, and I think you're really going to be pleased with the result. Thanks for watching.